Okay, let's go ahead and get ready to start. We have some people here, people will probably stream in along the way. And we're also recording this, of course, so other undergraduates can hear this as well. But I wanted to welcome everybody to our event titled, What Can You Do with a Psychology Degree? And this event is actually part of the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences 50th anniversary. And I just also wanted to remind everyone, yep, 50 years. I just wanted to remind everyone that this event is being recorded, and so that we can post it online for other undergraduates as well. Let me introduce myself. My name is Bert Uchino. I'm the chair of psychology. I'm the co-moderator of this event. I have been now here at the University of Utah for 27 years or so. I have no idea where the time went, but it certainly has passed by quickly. And I can tell you that in my 27 years here, I don't think we've had a similar event like this. So hopefully this will be very helpful for everyone involved, as well as just posting it online generally as well. The co-moderator is Selena. Selena, do you want to introduce yourself real quickly?
Sure. My name's Selena Wirthlin. I'm a senior at the U right now, and I transferred here in 2018 from Florida. I'm a psych major and a kinesiology major following a pre-med track. So I'm almost done, which is very exciting. But I was very excited when Bert reached out to me about collaborating for this event because, yeah, I don't think Psych has really done anything like this collaboration-wise. So even though we have Zoom fatigue, it's kind of a cool opportunity just to get involved in something like this. So I feel like you guys can all help us learn something. We're all pretty interested in what you guys have to say. So yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. So just to give you a general sense of the format that we're going to be doing tonight, it's for about the first half of the event, we're going to have Selena basically ask questions of the panelists. And then the last half of it will be, we'll take questions from any of the attendees here. And so you can feel free to type a question in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring it. And you can either do that now, or you can do that as you see what the questions are being asked. And eventually we hope to get to that as well. So if you have questions, feel free to use the chat box. I wanted to now have the panelists introduce themselves. And so I've asked them to kind of introduce themselves and give their general background, but also talk about or share one of their positive memories about being at the University of Utah. So let's start with you, Lace.
I just want to start by saying thank you so much for inviting me. I was very excited to talk to this group because I do have such fond memories of being at the University of Utah. My name is Lace Padilla. I'm an assistant professor in the Cognitive and Information Sciences Department at UC Merced. I graduated in 2018 with my PhD in cognitive and neurosciences. And after I received a PhD, I went on to do a short postdoc and then received a faculty position that I love. It is a fantastic life, even in this online world. Having a faculty position at a university is just wonderful. It's wonderful to be able to study what you love. And if you're interested, I highly encourage you to pursue that. I think one of my favorite memories of the U was, I actually have 2 degrees from the U. I have a master's degree in art. And when I was in art, I met a fantastic researcher who studied perception. And she was so warm and interested in collaboration that she allowed me to work in her lab, but as an artist. So my favorite memory from the U is the faculty being so willing and open to collaborate that they opened up a whole new research trajectory for me. And so it helped me transition from a degree in art to a PhD in cognitive science, and now I'm a faculty member in cognitive science. And I study how the mind understands and processes visual information. So I get to use my art background and my cognitive science background.
Thank you. Scott.
Well, thanks, and like everyone else, thank you so much for inviting me to be here, and especially Dean Uchino, who has given me permission to call him Bert, so I'm going to do that. My path in career and I suppose longevity is a little different than maybe the rest of the group. I'm a U of U psych grad, class of 78, and MSW, U of U MSW class of 80. followed by Seattle University Law School in 1983. And so that path was strewn with all kinds of unexpected twists and turns, but ultimately since 1983, I've been an attorney. I've been in private practice. I've passed the bar in 3 states, Utah, Oregon, and Washington. But since 1990, I've been an assistant attorney general in the Utah Attorney General's office as a prosecutor, which is the guy who chases bad guys and convicts them of wrongdoing and sees that they are properly sanctioned. Sometimes it's prison, sometimes it's a fine, sometimes it's community service, but sanctions are an integral part of criminal justice, and we're starting to learn now that maybe they're not the most important part. And so I think the behavioral sciences especially have a prominent place in the future of the success of the criminal justice system. So thank you again, Bert and ladies, for putting up with me for the next hour.
Thank you. Christy.
Thanks, Bert. My name is Christy Thuitt. I graduated from the University of Utah with a psychology degree back in 2007, and then I graduated from the University of Utah Medical School in 2012. And I am now a pediatrician, and I'm also, interestingly, very recently the founder and executive director of a nonprofit organization providing PPE and COVID-19 relief support to hospitals across tribal communities in Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. So Native American communities that we support, and that has taken a lot of my time recently. My degree in psychology at the University of Utah was not by accident. It was part of my grand plan to go to medical school. And I use that aspect of my education every day. So I do a lot of behavioral modification, both with parents and with children. And I use that psychology background a lot. And I would say that in any field in medicine, psychology is part of your everyday career. So I really enjoyed my time at the University of Utah. My psychology degree kind of had a particular focus on the clinical neuroscience part of things. And so one of my fond memories of my time there was I participated in research with Dr. Kessner studying spatial memory in rats. And so at a very, very young age in life, I was doing neurosurgery on rats in the psychology building. And that was one of my fond memories of that time. So I'm happy to be here and hope I can answer any questions of anybody interested in a career in medicine, and just to be part of this great group of people here. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Rachel.
Hi, I am Rachel Sturm, and I graduated from University of Utah with my bachelor's and human factors certificate, actually, as well, in 2014. Recently, I have graduated with my master's in human factors and applied cognition from George Mason. And I have an interest, right now I do learning experience design for Western Governors University. So I took a very different track than all of you. I went more into the technology and design. So that's been really fun. I've had a really great experience with that. And my fondest memory of being at the U is definitely working in a psychology lab with Dr. David Strayer. That's actually where my love of user experience design and research blossomed, is working on infotainment centers in vehicles for that lab.
Hey, thank you. And, thank you all again for being here. I know everybody's really busy. We certainly really appreciate your expertise here and coming and sharing that with us today. So with that said, I am going to turn it over now to Selena for some questions.
Perfect. So I think the way we'll do is we'll just split it 2 and 2. So every other question will go to Rachel and Christy, and then every other question will go to Elise and Scott. So we'll start off with Rachel and Christy. So what are some skills you developed while completing your undergraduate psych degree that you use in your current occupation? I guess I should have said who goes first. Rachel, you can go first.
Thanks. So a skill set that I acquired during my undergrad was definitely user research and research design. That has really helped me in my career now, understanding, how to go about developing surveys or what kind of questions to ask users and things like that. It's something that was really helpful to have from my undergrad, as well as in my master's as well, was developing that kind of research because it's really valuable in the field that I'm in right now.
I guess I would say that for the field that I'm in, the research involvement, while it may not be my favorite part of my career, the kind of skills that I gained participating in a research lab, a basic science lab, in my undergrad career, I think is really helpful for over the course of medicine. You really start to learn the skills of how to validate if a study is well done or not, and how to kind of interpret the results based on the methods that were used and things like that. And so I think that's really helpful to get an understanding of that early on, and to have some like hands-on involvement in that process, so that when you're reading these research papers, that you're kind of starting to put together a picture of, was this the correct method to evaluate for what your outcome was, and things like that. So that basic science understanding, I feel like even though I had a lot of pre-med classes, of course, I think that my psychology experience actually was what gave me those skills.
That's great to hear. So for Lace and Scott, it's kind of a similar question, but maybe a little bit more broad. It's kind of just, how do you use your psychology degree in your current occupation? And Lace, you can go first.
I think every aspect of my occupation involves my psychology degree. I mean, I now teach undergraduate courses in psychology. I run research experiments. It's absolutely everything. I will say one of the unexpected ways that I use psychology happens to be in interpersonal management of groups. So learning how, or sort of understanding how people reason with information and how to frame things in certain ways to sort of help communicate effectively is something that I wouldn't have expected to be so useful, that I learned in psychology.
As I went through the psych program and the MSW program, my focus was more on the macro side. I wasn't as inspired by the clinical approach, but more like organizations and function. And so what I learned when I became a lawyer is you spend a good deal of time one-on-one with clients who are there because they have a problem and they need your help. And so you spend a lot of time counseling and structuring and organizing and offering options or opportunities, which ultimately they have to be the decision maker on. And so I didn't anticipate when I was going through the college experience that I would end up being a counselor for people, but that's exactly what happened to me. But in my current job, up until probably February of this year, we did a lot of trial work, and in court, part of the process is to be able to select a jury that will hear a case and decide the outcome of the case. And so there's a wee bit of psychology involved in the jury selection process as well. So it's come to serve me pretty well there as I look behind the answers to see what is really going on in that person's head and trying to figure out if they're the ideal person to decide the case.
Yeah, I love your answers. It kind of seems like the unexpected benefits are kind of something that really sticks with you. So that's nice to hear. We'll go back to Rachel. So what's kind of a skill, or I guess something you wish you learned in your or you took the time to learn in your undergraduate psych degree that could benefit you if you had taken the time to focus on it?
Well, that's hard. I feel like my undergrad like really set me up for success in what I wanted to do for my master's, just by doing extra stuff, like getting involved in labs and getting my human factors certificate on top of my bachelor's. One thing, though, I think that would help me, at least today in my current role, is knowing a little bit more computer science background. So if I would have had the time or energy to, explore that a little bit farther, that probably would have helped me. But I would say that there's enough in the psych program as an undergrad as it is that is really helpful depending on like where you want to go with it.
I was hoping you weren't going to finish, Rachel. I have no idea an answer to this question. I can't really think of anything off of my head. I think that part of the reason that I chose psychology as a major while doing pre-med was for kind of a broader experience. I also think, and this is even much truer now than it was when I was applying to medical school, but having a non-chemistry or biology degree, something that sets you apart on an application, actually goes a really long way nowadays. So I can't think of anything off of my head that would say what I could have done differently, but I do think that there were reasons that was actually really helpful to have psychology along with the pre-med classes.
That's great to hear that you guys felt really prepared. I feel like that can kind of give us a little bit of confidence that we are choosing the right path when choosing a psych undergraduate degree. So the next question is kind of, did you have any resources, clubs or organizations or the research you've mentioned that you used that you would recommend for other undergraduates to kind of get involved in right now or when they can?
I think that goes to me next, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say a big one would be SACNAS, Society for Native Americans and Chicanos in Science, if you are interested in that. And I know that people from outside of those groups are also members of that group as well. It is really fantastic because it connects you across campus with other students studying STEM topics, and it gives you access to conferences that they do within that organization, so you can get practice presenting your research that you've done in your undergrad at those conferences and get feedback. And I thought it was very helpful because they offer lots of professional development workshops as well, how to do a resume, how to apply for grants. And yeah, I think it was one of the key factors to some of my success was having a group like that available on campus. And they have a very strong group right now. So that's definitely one that I would consider.
Well, it's a really good question. As I look back 40 plus years to my experience, I don't recall formal groups like that were available, or at least I don't recall seeking them out. But I would say that it is helpful, if not essential. And you're in a discipline now as students that it is very likely that you will continue to pursue your formal education to a higher level, whether at the graduate level or the MD level, or heaven forbid, the Juris Doctorate level. But as you go more deeply into the higher education system, your stress level increases tremendously as well. And if you don't anticipate that and form your own support groups among your peers, you will not benefit as much from the experience. And unfortunately, you may wash out because it's tough, and you have to anticipate that it's going to be tough, and you have to kind of train yourself in the art of stress management, because that is something, and especially I think more today than ever before, is a constant in all of our pursuits. And so I would say form your own support group among your peers, people that you know, people that you trust, and people that you are willing to open up to and share some of your weaknesses, because that's not common. And especially I'm thinking about law school as a highly competitive academic environment. It's not common for law students to share among themselves their weaknesses, but it tends to isolate you if you don't. So I would take counsel from other people who have been there before me and ask them that question. But I would also engage myself in a little self-help and anticipate that I'm gonna need some people along the way to help me out.
I love that response. I feel like that is something that is really easily overlooked by undergraduate students. So we have so much going on. That's something that we kind of forget to focus on, but it's a really valid and important point. We'll head back to Rachel. So is there a specific, I know you did your human factors, so it's probably going to be one of those courses, but is there a specific course whose content kind of stuck with you, or that you kind of look back and really feel that that course's content prepared you for your current occupation?
Yes, and it is a human factors class, but I want to say it's in like the cognitive core anyway, or but it was a introduction to human factors that I have never struggled so hard to make an A- in my life. I've never cried on so many studying sessions, but I learned so much, and I retained so much from that class, and it was so applicable across, other courses that I went into, and I think it really gave me a leg up, especially in going into a master's program for human factors. So I would say if you're interested in that, definitely take that class.
Cool.
I don't think that I could remember the exact name and title of the classes that I had many years ago. But I know that the ones that focused on the cognitive behavioral sciences, also the kind of neurobehavioral pathways, and I think it might have had neurobehavioral pathways in the title. Those courses were incredibly beneficial. One, they were so interesting, but two, they also, those were courses that that I had a leg up compared to my non-psych colleagues in medical school when we were getting into those neural pathways and learning, that I felt at an advantage that I had been studying that for some time. So I think those, anything in that clinical neurosciences subsection is incredibly helpful.
That's great. I guess actually I feel like it could kind of be good just to hear from Lace and Scott on the same topic. Just there was a specific course material that really stuck with you and prepared you or helped you with your current occupation.
My favorite course was by Professor Sarah Creamer-Gear, and it's Sensation and Perception. I love that class. I go back to her slides all the time. It was so much fun, and it just really opened my mind to considering how the information that we perceive isn't necessarily the information out there. That perception is a little different than reality, which can flavor the way you think about the world every day. So definitely take a look at that class if it fits in your schedule.
Thanks, Selena. I'm glad I get to answer this question because I have some early trauma to release here. I talked to Bert about this a little bit through the email. And Christy will like this too, the single hardest class I ever took as an undergraduate, as a graduate, as a JD candidate was physiological psychology from Ray Kessner. And I worked so hard in that class to get an A-. And graduate level statistics, property law in law school, nah, not even close. And so having had that experience, and I had a study partner who was about 10 years older than me, and we spent a good 20 hours a week together on that class. But it showed me that you can do whatever you want to do. And when I got to graduate school, it didn't seem as much of a challenge. When I got to law school, I knew I could do the work. I knew I could complete the task. And so having had Ray put me through the paces, and I told Bert I still remember noradrenergic synapses and the role of alpha methyl P tyrosine. So that's a good 40 plus years ago. So some things stay with you.
Wow, that's impressive. I'll have to look into that course maybe, but I have taken sensation and perception, and I would recommend it as well. It really opens your eyes. So that's a really cool course. I'm glad you mentioned that and that you like that course as well, Lace. We'll head back to Rachel and Christy. So was it your intention when you began your undergraduate degree to attend graduate school or medical school? And if so, what advice can you give to someone who may be either switching into that path or kind of just have decided that and kind of just need some guidance?
Yeah, when I actually started my undergrad, I didn't know what human factors was. I actually wanted to go into clinical psych, and then taking a couple courses, being introduced to that field, definitely opened my eyes and kind of redirected my whole path. I can't remember if I feel like I had intention of attending grad school after my undergrad, but I didn't really know in what or when and how or what have you. So the extracurriculars, I guess you would call them, being in people's labs, like doing different types of research, really kind of helped not only solidify that I did want to go to grad school, but also help me network and find out schools that would be a good fit, professors at those schools that did really cool research that I wanted to get involved in. So that's pretty much it. Yeah. But so I would definitely say, depending on what route you want to take, that grad school is awesome. I really, really enjoyed the master's program I was in at George Mason. It's a great program for human factors. Yeah, I think it doesn't hurt. I love school, so I'm a bad person to like, oh, I could be a professional student, I would. But I highly recommend doing grad school and just honing your skills in a particular area.
I was unfortunately one of those super weird children that loved to like pull my Barbies' heads off and look inside of them and pretend to do surgery on them when I was 5. So my pathway to medicine was going to happen whether they let me in or not, I think. So yeah, I definitely started day one doing pre-med along with psychology. I touched on this before, that I think it's really important to have something other than your pre-med courses for your application. I also think it's really important to have something that you're interested in to fall back on if medicine doesn't happen for you. And whether that means that you don't get into medical school or whether you get 4 years in and you decide, I don't want to do this anymore. My husband is an emergency physician, and his undergraduate degree was in chemistry. And when he applied to medical school, he got on the wait list, and he thought to himself, what am I going to do with this degree that I hate? And so I definitely, chose psychology because it was something that I knew that there were a lot of different ways, if I didn't get into medical school, that I could use it and be happy. I would have loved to be a clinical psychologist. There's so many different ways that you can use a psychology degree. So I think not only is it a great way to set yourself apart if you're applying to medical school, but I also think it gives you a lot of options if that pathway doesn't come to fruition for you, whether it's your choice or not. So I wouldn't change anything about the way that I did the undergrad. It is a little harder, I think, to do pre-med with a non-chemistry biology major. It requires more hours, of credits to accomplish those tasks. But I also think that it came up in my interviews for medical school as an interesting topic. My medical school application and the personal statement talked about synapses and things like that in my personal statement. So I think that it gave me something that was unique to discuss, and that even kind of carried through when I applied to residency as well. So I think it was a great combination for going to medical school.
Yeah, I love to hear that as someone who's pre-med with a psych degree. So I know you guys touched on it a little bit, I think you did, Lace, about kind of what your research interests were as an undergrad or graduate student, and then kind of how you became interested in that line of research.
Well, mine's a little bit more obvious. I had a background in art, and to be frank, I didn't know that there was a science that studied why visual information affects us. I just didn't know that that was a thing that people studied. So I was just so darn excited to realize there was a field of research that I could do. So I started out in volunteering in a perception lab. Very similar to kind of what Rachel's experience was, this kind of extracurricular, additional work volunteering in a lab, which I highly recommend. And through that, I learned all of the open questions in the field. And I recognized that there was kind of a gap in the field for studying how people understand data visualizations, particularly those with uncertainty, like COVID-19 visualizations or hurricane forecasts. So I was basically the whole time looking for a way to apply my research or my interest in art to research that would in some way help people. So it took some time to figure out what that niche was, something that I could contribute to science, also contribute to society that involved my background. But that's kind of how I went about it. And when I suggest to other people that are looking at research, I say, find the thing that you love, like whatever it is that you love, there's a science that studies it in depth, and then you can learn how it functions. And I think that's a really good approach, because everything in psychology will probably affect something that you're interested in. So there's a specific niche for whatever it is your passions are.
Okay, I have nothing to contribute to the conversation about research, but let me share some thoughts about what I found very helpful in my career path. And that was, while I was still in undergrad, I went to work full-time at Primary Children's Hospital on the inpatient psychiatric unit as a psych tech. And the pay wasn't great, but I began to associate with doctors and social workers and nurses and other staff. It was all inpatient. They had a secure unit, and they had a school. And so you got to rub elbows with a lot of professionals with a lot of experience. And I think that really helps you kind of guide or inform your decision making, because when I got to at that time, it was Primary Children's Center on 12th Avenue, and the unit was called 3 South. And when I got to 3 South as a psych tech, it didn't take me long to figure out that if I was going to get anywhere in this business, I needed to get an advanced degree. So I almost immediately began to make plans for attending social work, graduate social work school, MSW school. And through that, I got to know another set of folks. But watching our model, it was a strong behavior modification model on the unit. And we had kids from anywhere young 3, 4 years old, all the way up to 16, 17 years old. And the classic case study was the kid was out of control, had all kinds of issues at home, came to the unit. After 6 weeks, they were great. Send them back to mom and dad, the whole thing falls apart. And you begin to watch that cycle, and you see that it's maybe not the therapists and the social workers and the educators who really have as much control in the system as the juvenile court does, with its authority over families and children. So that's what sparked my interest in the law, was the idea that maybe I wanted to go be a juvenile court judge. And that's really what caused me to apply. And it was a kind of a short turnaround from immediately from MSW to the JD program. But I was headed for the juvenile court system until I bumped into a criminal defense attorney who put me to work as a law clerk, and all of a sudden I fell in love with the criminal law, and that's where I ended up. But if you seek out real world experiences, whether it's part-time job, volunteering, mentoring, or tutoring, you get a better sense of who you are in relationship to what's available in the world and what you think you might be good at.
Thanks for sharing your experiences. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so if you're in the audience and you have some questions, go ahead and ask them. We're a little over halfway through the meeting, so if you have anything you'd like to have answered, go ahead. This is a great opportunity to have your questions answered by people who've experienced what you're going through firsthand. So I guess we'll go ahead and keep going with the questions, and we'll keep an eye out on that Q&A box. So go ahead and start asking kind of everyone. We'll just follow the same order. So we'll have Rachel, and then Christy, and then Lace and Scott. So this is kind of a general one, maybe a fun one. What's the single best career advice that you've ever received at any point in your life?
I would say the best advice is do extra. That's helped me a lot, and just in instead of just going through my courses and just kind of getting through it's helped me a lot to do a little bit extra, whether it's volunteering in a lab or doing research on the side or getting a human factors certificate along with my degree. And that has also helped me in my career is, if I'm interested in something, doing some like LinkedIn learning classes or something like that on just something a little bit extra. So that's been it.
I think the best career advice, my husband and I were just talking about this the other day. In our particular line of work, we always talk to medical students and residents about every day as an interview. You should treat every interaction as an interview or someone who's interviewing you. And what I mean by that is that you never know when a relationship is going to come around when you're applying for something. The connections that you're making, Scott was talking about networking, like even as your freshman year of college, that can make an impact on getting into medical school or getting the job that you want. And also that every single person that you encounter can have an impact on that too. So whether that's the janitor, whether that's the person in the parking garage that you're asking for directions. We had every single year in our residency program, there would be an interviewee who would have this great interview, would get along with the physicians, the other residents would like them, but every single year, guaranteed, we would get feedback that at some point in that process from them arriving to our hospital, they had behaved rudely to somebody that they encountered, and that got back to us, and those people didn't match. And so I think it's important to consider that every single person that you come in contact with could have an impact on your career, and to treat them as an equal and as a valued encounter.
Do you want me to answer, or are we going to go just?
Yeah, we're just going to have everyone answer.
Okay. I think mine is that you are smart enough. I don't know if you're like me, but I have intense imposter syndrome. Everyone seems smarter than me from a stronger background in every way. And what I realized is that all it takes is work. You can get into a graduate program, you can get your PhD, you can be a professor, you can go in industry. The only thing that matters is that you have to work hard for it. And there's no special person who is intelligent enough or, you know, has some special skill. You just have to work. And if you work, you can attain whatever objective you're looking for. But there really is no limit to your possibility as long as you put in the work.
Well, and there's a contrast in my world between the legal community and that world and the helping professions that I came from. And so it sounds a little antithetical, but the best advice I ever got was my first employer in the law, who was the criminal defense attorney I spoke of earlier. And he said to me, don't concede anything. And that was not a request. And I thought about that and I said, well, aren't we supposed to try to get along? Can't we compromise? Can't we admit when we're wrong? But I think his point was greater. If you have an argument and you have conviction about your argument, make your argument. Stand on your principle. Make your best argument. And if a judge or jury decides they like somebody else's argument better, you did what you thought was best for yourself and your client. And so I think that applies into every pursuit. Stand on your principle, make your best argument. If you lose, you lose. You're not going to win every time. Not in this business, not in any business. And that's a lesson we all learn probably the hard way. But here we are now. And whatever field you pursue, stand on principle, make your best argument.
I love all of those. They're kind of tough love that you need to hear sometimes, or things that make you open your eyes to what the actual situation's like. So we ended up getting some questions, so we'll go ahead and have everyone answer these. The first question is, if you could go back in time to tell yourself something while in pursuit of your education, what would it be?
It's worth it. That's what I would tell myself. It's worth it. And it does get better. So I know it's hard at times and you feel burnt out and you feel like you're never going to get there, but you will, and it gets better and it'll be worth it.
I think it took me until my very last board exam to learn the art of letting it go. It's so easy, particularly, people who are type A personalities, to have every single little moment feel like the end of the world or the biggest moment. Every single exam or end of semester exams or board exams, you have to let things go. You're going to do your best. You're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. But at the end of the day, whatever you get on something or your performance, you just have to say, that was my best and that's what I did. And I got to let it go, because it can become debilitating. I see this a lot in pre-med students now, and even medical students. It can become so debilitating to get fixated on the outcome of something that's in the past. You can't change it now. What do we do to move forward? So I think it's really important to learn the art of doing your best, getting what you get out of that, and letting it go and moving on.
I think for me, I really like that. Thank you for sharing. I'm still working on the letting it go part, slowly arriving at that. For me, it's sort of a related piece of advice, sort of just what I would tell my past self, which is that you will get a job. I was so afraid that I would never get a job. You hear these dire reports of the job market, and I have my dream job, and everyone in my cohort has a great job that they love. Every single person has a job that they love right now. And if I had known that going in, I just don't think I would have been as scared. I was always, freaked out that I'm not doing enough, or, so if I could have calmed down a little bit in the process, that would have been nice.
Well, kind of a corollary to what Christy was saying earlier, I think the hardest lesson for me in my adult life was that moment that I realized I can't do everything. And it comes to all of us. And the day you realize that you're not going to be a professional athlete, a best-selling novelist, a PhD psychologist, and leader of the church choir, is the time that you begin to prioritize and set goals. Once you set a goal, then accept the fact that you're going to have to forego some things that you may prefer to do in order to achieve that goal, and it becomes more of a priority. So I'm not suggesting you give up your dreams, but at some point the road forks and you got to pick the road, or the one that's right for you, and then make that a priority.
Great. The next question is kind of about taking gap years. So seems like for psych that postgraduate education is kind of necessary. So if someone is burnt out this year, or if they need a gap year or two before moving on to graduate school, what's something you'd recommend for these soon-to-be graduates that would help them explore their interests or make their gap years valuable?
I actually took a few gap years, so I'm a big fan of gap years. I started working full-time in the lab I was actually volunteering in after I graduated, and briefly before that, before they had time for that, I worked at Waterford Research Institute, just doing data analysis and working with SPSS and doing more like research design and writing papers. So, and I think honestly that gave me a really big leg up to apply to grad school. It kind of set me apart from the rest because my GRE scores were very average, but I think my experience and things that I had done extra really helped. So I would say if you are burnt out, that's totally okay. Don't force yourself to go straight to grad school, and get a job. If you're wanting to get a job in the meantime, get one that you feel like would further your skills in one area or another, whether that's data analyses or being a design intern, something like that. I feel like it's huge to also, love yourself while you're wanting to go to school. So yeah.
I am a huge advocate of gap years. I think it just has to be worthwhile, and that could be done in a lot of different ways. It's really important that you have, and I'm only going to speak towards applying to medical school because I feel like there's others that can speak to different programs. If you have a worthwhile gap year that you can discuss as something that had meaning to you, something that was impactful, something that shaped who you are, that can actually be a really incredible personal statement. It can draw people into an interest in you. It also makes you memorable if you get it to the interview point of this unique experience compared to everybody else. Worthwhile, I think, could mean a lot of different things. I don't mean that you necessarily need to go out and work in a research lab for 2 years for worthwhile. That sounds the opposite of unburnt out to me. But it could be, something where you join the Peace Corps, or you go and you learn Spanish in South America for a year. Something that is meaningful to you, that rejuvenates you. And also, I really think that if you apply to medical school after having time off, it also shows like your commitment, right? It's very easy to go out into the world and say, gosh, you know what? I'm making okay money. I'm enjoying my life. Do I really want to pursue graduate education and the rough schedule of that and the isolation of that and things? If you go out and have that experience and you apply at that point, like I think that to the people who are getting those applications, that really shows a commitment to your interest in pursuing this. And so I think it can be really beneficial if done the correct way. Not saying like I took 6 months off to serve or something like that. That probably won't get you there. But I do think it could be beneficial. My husband and I were talking the other day, neither one of us had gap years. We really wish we had. We would strongly encourage our daughter when she's that age to do that before going on to graduate school.
Yeah, I would just echo what everyone else has said. I think everyone characterized it nicely. I know Rachel was a really good applicant. I was a graduate student when she was in a lab, and what she did was really smart and made her a really strong applicant. I had a gap year. Actually, I didn't know I was going to go to graduate school. I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to. So I just stopped going to school, and I got a job as a web developer. And now I use my skills in web design all of the time in research. It wasn't intentional, it was just an accidental benefit, but in hindsight, I would have done something more like what Rachel had done.
Well, and it kind of depends on what the gap is for, because there's a lot of legitimate reasons for taking some time off, as long as you understand and you're honest with yourself that it's your intention to come back, and this is for the purposes of fulfilling some other need, whether it's financial or emotional, or just as simple as wanting to get to know yourself a little better, so you're really certain about where you're headed and who you are, because who you are is always going to be the bottom line in your success. So to the extent that gap years are beneficial for recovery from something, you also have to kind of do whatever you can to meld the two worlds. And even if you are not attending university during that year and travel is your objective, or some other kind of personal pursuit is your objective, keep your education in mind. And I like what Christy said, take an immersive language class as part of your gap, just to take you away from everything that you've formally been studying. But don't forget about it. Don't turn it off and say, I'll be fine in a year, or how long it takes, and I can just forget about who I am and what my goals are for a year, and I'll come back and pick it up where I left off, because that never happens. Something will come along, and it'll be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you'll be convinced that, oh yeah, I'll be going back eventually. So don't, keep your eyes on the prize.
That's great advice. So the next question is specifically for Rachel. Someone's considering getting their human factors certificate and a job in a related field. What field of industry in human factors favors hiring psych students with a bachelor's degree? And is there anything that they should prepare on top of that certificate, such as learning Python or something else?
Yeah, do it. I loved my human factors certificate. It really wasn't that much extra work. I really enjoyed the classes, and the research project that I did was really interesting. It opened up my eyes to a lot of things. It gave me a lot of good practice. You can also publish and, present at a conference, which is, if you don't go on to grad school, is still a nice little cherry on top of your resume to apply. As far as industry, I would look for UX design. UX research and design is a huge field right now. It's blowing up, especially with us moving to more online things. Everything is moving online with COVID, and just as how technology moves forward, everyone wants to be able to access something at any time. That is a huge field I would highly recommend going into right now. For that extra stuff, I would look more into learning more front-end coding rather than Python or R. If you want to do heavier research, I would do R or SPSS for data analysis. But if you want to do more of the design element of that, look into Adobe XD, learning how to prototype, learning how to wireframe, things like that will really help. So I think that's something I would think about first, is what area, what kind of direction you want to go with it. Do you want to be more design heavy or more research heavy? That way you're not burning yourself out or stretching yourself too thin. With that said, though, it's always nice to have extra stuff to set you above another person. So if, a graphic designer comes in and wants to do UX design, and you have all the same credentials except for you also know R or you also know SPSS, that's a great leg up on some other competitors that may be applying for the same job. So just keep that in mind. But yes, do the human factors certificate. I loved it. You won't regret it. It's awesome.
Okay, and then we'll go ahead and squeeze in one last question. We're almost out of time. This one is kind of, how has your career withstood COVID, and how did a psych degree kind of prepare you, or how have you been able to integrate it for kind of this change, unexpected change. And we can just go in the order. So if you want to answer again, Rachel, start us off.
Yeah. Luckily, I was able to secure a job shortly after graduating with my master's, that they did a lot, like they were all online anyway. So a lot of their work is virtual. They do have a tangible brick and mortar office, but luckily a lot of the work is you can do remotely. So again, I think just going into a particular field that has that kind of flexibility, being able to do more technology-based work is really nice. Yeah, I think I honestly, I felt really lucky that I was able to get this job. So yeah, I would say if that's something that you are looking towards, make sure that they have the flexibility to do online stuff, and hopefully the companies will also be responsible and flexible enough that they're able to move stuff online. Sorry, I have little tails behind me.
I think this is such an interesting question. So, nobody would predict that a public health crisis would lead to physicians being furloughed, hiring freezes across the nation. It's a really interesting time in the world of medicine. I would say that the general population would expect that physicians have the safest jobs on earth right now. And I would say that we are probably one of the most at-risk jobs right now. So I would say most hospitals either furloughed 20% of their staff, or they gave their staff a 20% pay cut. The entire country has been on a hiring freeze since about April in terms of physicians getting jobs. It's just a very interesting time. My husband and I had never thought that job security would be an issue as physicians. My husband owns a staffing company that staffs emergency medicine groups, and the amount of doctors that he's had calling from all across the country who have worked at Mass General or UCLA, all these places that have been furloughed, that are great, incredible physicians that have been furloughed or laid off. It's been pretty remarkable. There's never been such a flood of physicians in the world right now. And also that it's really had a power shift where hospitals are now doing a lot more with a lot less. So I think that there's been quite a shift of workload onto physicians who are already pretty burnt out. So anyways, it's interesting how different this has gone than you would expect. In terms of how my degree has been integral, as a pediatrician, I deal a lot with parent fears, and psychology I think is really helpful for that. And this was, prior to COVID, that's a lot of what I deal with every day. And I found that it's actually very helpful to say to parents, tell me what it is that you're scared about, because people are fearful to tell you what they're fearful about. And COVID has brought that out in a whole new level. Sometimes, people bring their child and their child looks completely fine. I can't quite figure out, why are you here? And then I'll go back and I'll ask that question, and they'll tell me, some story about a family member remotely that was affected by COVID. And you really start to see the psychological impact on people that COVID is having. So my degree has definitely been really helpful in my career, and I'm grateful for that.
My career has been pretty good. I'll be honest. I'm from a blue collar family, so job security was a real thing. And that's a huge reason why I want to stay in academia. I have a tenure track position, and so those should be sticking around. I don't know any faculty who are getting laid off that are in these positions. And I will say, just as a plug for graduate school, I don't know any graduate students who are getting laid off. This doesn't really happen when there's unrest in the economic world or in any capacity. So most PhD programs are funded, fully funded. They pay you to go to school for at least around 4 years, and they also pay for your tuition. So just be aware of that. If you're wanting something that is stable. Definitely a faculty position is that, but also graduate school is a pretty good option.
I'm going to take a little different tact on this. I think it's clear, I can say with confidence, that everyone within the sound of my voice is under more stress today than they were a year ago. And it's, even if it's organizations or if it's individuals, we need to understand how stress affects us and how we can manage it. And over the course of my career, I started training police officers back in 1986, and I've conducted probably 350 training sessions with over 10,000 police officers. Uniformly, and that's a arguably high stress business. And uniformly, the advice I give to them is threefold. Number one, and this is all in the kind of the category of control the things that you can control and spend less time worrying about the things that you can't control. Number one, diet and exercise. You got to eat right and you got to stay active, or your body is going to go south on you. And the older you get, and I'm 67, the more prevalent that problem becomes. Number two, have a hobby that you can totally remove yourself from your stressful situation, your stressful environment, or your stressful world, and have, whether it's music or writing or macrame or needlepoint. I wouldn't recommend high stress activities like cliff diving and parachuting and that kind of stuff, because that tends to be counterproductive to the whole stress management thing. But the third thing is you have to have a good friend, and if you're lucky, it's your spouse. But whoever in your world is your good friend that you have confidence in, that you are willing to listen to them when they tell you you're wrong, when they give you criticism that you need to accept because you trust them. If you can have those three things in your world, then stress is going to become less debilitating and less of a obstacle to your success.
Great. So it seems like we're out of time. I just want to say I feel like I speak for everyone. I feel like your advice and your input, responses to the questions were really eye-opening and extremely valuable. So I'm really glad that you guys are all here and able to attend and able to kind of help us undergrads right now. I know hearing some of your answers definitely gave me some comfort, or kind of made me see that, you know, we're not alone when we stress. So, yep. So if you want to go back to take it over, Bert.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention first, before we wrap up, that for those of you who had a question in the chat that wasn't answered, feel free to email myself, or if you have another question that comes up, email me, and I can certainly try to answer it or get it to the people who could answer it. So thank you for coming. And I just wanted to thank, again, you know, echoing what Selena just said, this is a pretty amazing panel, I think, discussion that we had. And I'm really excited to eventually post this on our website, because I think so many of our undergraduates are going to benefit from this. And so thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, and we certainly appreciate it. Thank you.